Think about the last time you tried to let something go. Maybe it was a relationship that had been dead for months, but you kept dragging it along. Maybe it was a job that was slowly draining you. Maybe it was a habit you knew was hurting you, scrolling for hours, eating when you weren't hungry, going back to someone who never treated you right. You told yourself you'd stop. You made the decision 100 times, and then you didn't. And the worst part? You couldn't even explain why. You knew it wasn't good for you. You could see it clearly. Your friends could see it. Maybe a therapist could see it. But still, you held on. And every time you tried to let go, something deep inside you pulled back. Like your hand reaching for a door handle right before you walk out of a house you know you should leave. Here's what I want you to consider today. What if the problem isn't that you're weak? What if it's not that you lack discipline or willpower or self-respect? What if the real reason you can't let go has nothing to do with the thing you're holding on to, and everything to do with who you are when you're holding it? Because here's the truth that nobody really talks about. You're not afraid to let go. You're afraid of who you'll be without it. That one sentence changes everything. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why you hold on, what's actually happening in your brain and your heart when you do, and how to finally start building the kind of identity that doesn't need to cling to things that are hurting you. Stay with me. This is going to get deep. Let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about what attachment actually is, not in the clinical, textbook sense, but in the real human sense. From the moment you were born, your brain started learning one fundamental lesson. Survival depends on connection. As a baby, you couldn't feed yourself. You couldn't protect yourself. You couldn't do anything alone. So your nervous system developed an obsessive, relentless drive to attach. To people, to routines, to anything that made you feel safe. And here's the thing about that. It worked. That drive kept you alive. It kept you close to the people who could protect you, feed you, and love you. Attachment isn't a flaw. It's one of the most powerful survival tools your brain has ever developed. But here's where it gets complicated. Your brain doesn't just attach to things that are good for you. It attaches to familiar things. There's a huge difference between those two things, and most people never stop to think about it. Familiar feels safe, even when it's painful, even when it's destructive, even when every rational part of you knows that you'd be better off without it. The nervous system doesn't care about rationality. It cares about known versus unknown. And the unknown? That's terrifying. Even if what's waiting in the unknown is actually better. This is why people stay in relationships that make them miserable. Not because they love the misery, but because the misery is familiar. It has a shape. It has a rhythm. They know what to expect from it. And in a strange, twisted way, that predictability feels like safety. Walk away, and you step into something that has no shape at all. That formlessness is more frightening than the pain they already know. Now let's go one layer deeper. Because there's something even more specific happening here than just fear of the unknown. Every significant attachment you have to a person, to a role, to a habit, to a belief, becomes part of how you define yourself. It becomes part of your identity. And this is the part that people rarely talk about. Think about someone who has been in a relationship for 7 years. Even if that relationship is bad, even if both people are unhappy, that relationship is woven into the fabric of who that person is. They make decisions as a couple. They introduce themselves in relation to that other person. Their daily routines, their social circle, their sense of what a Tuesday evening looks like. All of it is built around this relationship. Now imagine asking that person to let go of it. They're not just losing a partner. They're losing a version of themselves. They're being asked to answer a question they have no answer to yet. Who am I without this? And that question is terrifying. Not because they're weak, because they're human. The same thing happens with jobs, with friendships that have run their course, with habits. I want you to think about something that might surprise you. Even a habit like scrolling your phone late at night, even something that seems so trivial, can become an identity anchor. It becomes part of who you are at 11 p.m. It's your wind-down ritual, your escape hatch, your way of avoiding the quiet. The moment you try to stop, the quiet rushes in. And in that quiet, you have to actually sit with yourself. And a lot of people don't know how to do that anymore. So they reach for the phone. Not because they want to scroll, but because they don't know who they are without the scrolling. Let me tell you something. This is one of the most underrated crises of our time. Not screen addiction, identity fragmentation. The slow erosion of knowing who you are at your core, separate from your habits, your relationships, your roles, your routines. When you lose that core sense of self, you cling to anything that gives you definition. And the more you cling, the more terrified you become of losing it. Now let's talk about relationships specifically, because this is where things get the most painful and the most misunderstood. You've probably heard the phrase codependency thrown around. But most people who hear that word immediately think, oh, that's not me. I'm not that extreme. I just love deeply. I'm just loyal. I just care a lot. Here's the thing. Codependency isn't always dramatic. It doesn't always look like someone who can't function without their partner. Sometimes it looks like this. You've built your entire personality around being someone's girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, caretaker, savior, or best friend. Your value as a person has gotten tangled up in your role to someone else. And when that relationship is threatened, or when you consider leaving, you don't just feel loss. You feel erasure. You feel like you might disappear. That's not a weakness. That's what happens when you haven't had the chance, or the safety, to develop a strong sense of self outside of your relationships. And here's the part that makes it even more complicated. Some people were never taught how to have a solid identity separate from the people around them. Some grew up in households where their job was to manage a parent's emotions. Some grew up surrounded by people who told them, explicitly or implicitly, that their worth was conditional on what they did for others. So they learned to attach their identity to relationships, to roles, to be needed, because that was the only way they knew how to exist safely in the world. Do you see how letting go becomes almost impossible under those conditions? It's not a lack of willpower. It's a survival mechanism that made complete sense at one point in your life, and now it's working against you. And here's something I want you to really hear. The pain you feel when you try to let go is real. It's not you being dramatic. It's not you being weak. Your nervous system is genuinely interpreting that potential loss as a threat to your survival. That is a physiological experience. Your cortisol spikes. Your heart rate increases. Your brain activates the same regions that respond to physical pain. Letting go literally hurts. And yet so many people judge themselves for not being able to do it easily, as if there's something wrong with them for feeling something so deeply human. Stop doing that to yourself. Stop treating your struggle as a character flaw. Start treating it as information. So what is it telling you? What does your attachment reveal about what you actually need? Because here's what I've come to believe. Every attachment that you struggle to release is pointing at something. It's pointing at a need that isn't being met, or a fear that isn't being faced. And until you address what's underneath, you will keep attaching. You will keep clinging. Not because you're broken, but because the underlying need doesn't go away just because you white-knuckle your way through letting go of one thing. Let me give you some examples. Someone who can't leave a dead relationship, even knowing it's over, is often terrified of being alone. Not just lonely. Alone. There's a difference. Loneliness is an emotion. Being alone is a state of existence that reveals who you are when you strip away all the external definitions. And if you've never built a solid internal identity, being alone doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like sitting in an empty house that hasn't been furnished yet. Echoey. Uncomfortable. Confronting. Someone who can't let go of a career they've outgrown is often terrified that their value is tied to their achievement. Take away the title, the salary, the status. And who are they? Are they still enough? Do they still matter? These are questions that a job can never actually answer. But the job has been serving as a substitute answer. And removing it means finally having to face the real question. Someone who can't break a habit, even a damaging one, is often using that habit to regulate an emotion they don't know how to regulate any other way. Stress, boredom, grief, anxiety. The habit isn't the problem. The habit is the solution to the problem. And until you develop other solutions, taking away the habit just means the problem has nowhere to go. Do you see the pattern? In every case, the thing being held on to isn't the actual issue. It's the function the thing is serving. It's the need it's filling. And if you try to let go without addressing that function, without finding another way to meet that need, you will struggle every time. And then you'll call yourself weak. And you'll be wrong. This is why willpower alone never works for long. Willpower is just suppression. And suppression doesn't resolve anything. It just postpones the reckoning. The people who seem like they can let go easily aren't necessarily stronger than you. They've often just done the deeper work. They've gotten to know themselves well enough to understand what they actually need. And they've built other ways of meeting those needs that don't require clinging to things that hurt them. Now I want to talk about something that I think is the most important part of this whole conversation. Identity reconstruction. Because once you understand that what you're really afraid of is who you'll be without the thing, the solution becomes obvious. But it's not easy. The solution is to build a self that exists independently of the things you attach to. A self that is stable enough that losing a relationship or leaving a job or breaking a habit doesn't feel like it's going to kill you. How do you do that? First, and this sounds simple, but most people skip it, you have to start spending time alone with yourself without the usual distractions. Not productive alone time. Not scrolling or podcasting or filling every moment with noise. Real, uncomfortable, quiet time. Because you cannot build a self you don't know. And you cannot know yourself if you never sit still long enough to listen. This is terrifying for a lot of people. What comes up in the quiet is often stuff they've been running from for years. Grief, shame, fear, old wounds. The feeling of being fundamentally not enough. Most people reach for their phone, their relationship, or their work the moment any of that starts to surface. The bravest thing you can do is to stay with it. Do not wallow in it. Don't analyze it to death. Just let it exist. Let it move through you. Because here's what happens on the other side of that discomfort. You realize you survived it. Every time you sit with something difficult and come through the other side intact, your nervous system gets a tiny bit of new information. I can handle this. I am okay. I exist outside of the things I've been holding on to. And slowly, that new information starts to replace the old story. Second, start paying attention to who you are in moments when you're not performing a role. Not when you're someone's partner. Not when you're being someone's employee. Not when you're being the funny one or the responsible one or the one who always has it together. Who are you when nobody's watching? What do you find interesting when you're not trying to impress anyone? What makes you laugh when you're completely alone? What do you actually believe when you're not trying to fit into someone else's worldview? These aren't trivial questions. These are the questions that build the foundation of an identity that can stand on its own. And most adults in their 20s, 30s, even 40s have barely begun to answer them because they've been too busy being things for other people. Third, and this is crucial, start building meaning outside of the thing you're attached to. If it's a relationship, start investing in friendships, in hobbies, in your own goals and projects. Not as a way of replacing the relationship, as a way of expanding the territory of who you are. Because the reason the relationship feels irreplaceable is often that it's become your primary source of meaning. When you build meaning in multiple places, no single thing becomes so load-bearing that losing it would collapse everything. This applies to everything. If your entire sense of purpose comes from your job, build something else that gives you purpose. If your entire social world runs through one friendship, start widening your world. Not because those things might end, but because you deserve a life that is full enough that nothing and no one becomes an anchor you can't lift. Fourth, and maybe most importantly, learn to grieve. This is something our culture is spectacularly bad at. We want to skip the pain. We want the growth without the loss. We want to be okay immediately. But grief is not a problem to be solved. Grief is the cost of having loved something, of having built something, of having invested yourself in something that mattered. And when you refuse to grieve, when you power through or numb out or jump immediately to the next thing, you don't avoid the pain. You just carry it forward. Unprocessed grief is one of the main reasons people can't let go of the past. Not because they're stuck, but because they never actually moved through it. So cry if you need to cry. Sit with the loss. Talk about it. Write about it. Let it be as big as it actually is. Because on the other side of real grief is something nobody talks about, a kind of spaciousness, a clearing, a sense that something old has finally been released, and there is room for something new. That's not a weakness. That's one of the most emotionally intelligent things a human being can do. Now, let's bring this all the way back to the beginning, to the original question. Why do people hold on when they know they should let go? Because they haven't built a self that exists outside of the thing. Because the thing, whatever it is, has become a load-bearing wall in the architecture of their identity. And they can't remove a load-bearing wall without the whole structure coming down. But here's what I want you to understand. Structures can be rebuilt. Better ones. Stronger ones. Ones that don't depend on a single relationship, a single role, or a single habit to keep them standing. And this is the work. Not letting go. The letting go is just the final step. The real work is everything that comes before it. Learning who you are, building a life with enough breadth and depth that nothing becomes a chain, and developing the capacity to sit with discomfort and come through it intact. When you've done that work, or even started it, even just begun to turn in that direction, letting go stops feeling like dying. It starts feeling like making room. It starts feeling like you're clearing space for the next version of yourself. The better one. The freer one. The one who doesn't need to hold on because she knows. He knows that who they are doesn't live in the thing. It lives in them. I want to tell you something before we go to the second part of this video, and I want you to really hear it. The person you're afraid of becoming without this thing, without the relationship, without the job, without the habit, without the version of yourself you've been performing for years, that person isn't a stranger. That person is you. Maybe the most authentic version of you you've ever been. The one who exists independent of what you're holding. The one who was there before the attachment. The one who will be there after. That person is not empty. That person is nothing. That person is the only real thing in this whole equation. Everything else, every relationship, every role, every habit, those are things you have, not things you are. You are not your relationship. You are not your job. You are not your routine or your reputation or your history. You are the one who has those things. And the one who has those things doesn't vanish when they're gone. That's the truth that sets people free, not the letting go itself, the understanding that you can. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with this question for a moment instead of just moving past it. If you stripped away everything that you're currently holding on to, every role, every relationship, every habit, every label you use to define yourself, who would you be? What would you still have? What would still be yours? What would still be true about you? I genuinely believe that when people sit with that question long enough, they find something they didn't expect. They find themselves. And they find that who they actually are is not as fragile, not as empty, not as dependent on external things as they were afraid it would be. The fear is bigger than the reality. It almost always is. Now here's where I want to shift gears, because I think there's another dimension to this that we haven't fully addressed yet. And that's the social dimension of letting go. What happens to your identity in the eyes of other people when you release something that has defined you to them? This is something that keeps people stuck in ways they rarely admit out loud. You've been a couple for so long that your social circle barely remembers who you were before. You've been in this career for so long that nobody in your family understands who you are outside of it. You've been the reliable one, the caretaker, the strong one, the one who always shows up. And the idea of letting go of that role means dealing not just with your own loss of identity, but with other people's confusion and disappointment. Because other people are attached to your roles too. Other people have built their relationship with you around a certain version of you. And when you change, when you let go of something that defined you, it can destabilize them. Some people will push back. Some will get uncomfortable. Some will try, consciously or not, to keep you in the old version of yourself because it's easier for them. This is one of the most common and least talked about reasons people stay stuck. Not just their own fear, but the social cost of change, the relationships that might shift, the people who might not understand, the version of you that other people are comfortable with, that they've organized their expectations around, that they might resist losing even if it's good for you. And here's the hard truth. If you're going to grow, really grow, some relationships won't survive it. Not because you're abandoning people, but because some connections were built on the old version of you. And as you become more fully yourself, those connections will naturally require renegotiation. Some will evolve, some won't. That's not a reason to stay small. That's a reason to start building relationships with people who can love the real you, not just the role you've been playing. This is also why therapy, or deep and honest friendships, or community around growth and self-awareness matters so much. Because when you're trying to let go of an old identity and build a new one, you need witnesses. You need people who know you in your becoming, not just people who knew you in your having been. People who can reflect on who you're growing into, not just who you used to be. Let me also say something about time. Because one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to let go is expecting it to happen all at once. You don't release a 7-year relationship in a day. You don't step out of a 20-year career and immediately know who you are. You don't break a 10-year habit and feel immediately free. Letting go is a process. And that process often looks messy and nonlinear and confusing. There will be days when you feel free and clear and like yourself. And there will be days when the grief comes back, when the old craving rises, when you wonder what you've done and whether it was right. Both of those things can be true at the same time. The doubt doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you're human. It means you actually cared about what you let go of. It means you're in the messy middle, and the messy middle is exactly where growth lives. Be patient with yourself in this process. Not passive, but patient. Keep moving, even when it's uncomfortable. Keep investing in the new version of yourself, even when it feels uncertain. Because the certainty doesn't come before the change. It comes after. It comes from experience. It comes from looking back one day and realizing that the thing you were so afraid to lose, you barely even miss it anymore. And you can't believe you held on so long. That day will come. I promise you that. Not because life is easy or because change doesn't hurt, but because human beings are extraordinarily resilient. And you are more capable of reinventing yourself than you have ever been told. I want to come back to habits for a moment because I said something earlier that I want to expand on. I said that a habit is often a solution to a problem, a way of managing an emotion you don't know how to manage otherwise. And I think this is the most liberating reframe available when it comes to changing behavior. When you stop seeing your habit as a weakness or a moral failure and start seeing it as a coping strategy that made sense at some point, something shifts. Because suddenly you're not fighting yourself. You're working with yourself. You're asking, what does this habit do for me? What need does it meet? What feeling does it cover or create? And what else could meet that need? This is the whole framework of modern habit psychology. You don't break habits by eliminating them. You replace them. You find another behavior that meets the same underlying need. Ideally, a behavior that doesn't cost you as much. And you build that behavior into your environment and your routine until it becomes the new default. But here's what I want to add to that framework. Because even when you've identified the need and found a replacement behavior, there's still the identity layer. There's still the part of you that has organized itself around this habit. The late-night scroller, the stress eater, the person who uses work as a way of never having to sit still. Those aren't just behaviors. They're characters. They're roles you play in your own story. And changing them requires updating the story. Not just swapping out a behavior. Updating the narrative you have about who you are. Starting to say, not just, I want to stop doing this, but this is not who I am. Not, I'm trying to eat better, but I'm someone who takes care of my body. Not, I'm trying to be less available to people who drain me, but I'm someone who respects my own energy. Identity-based change is the most durable kind of change. Because you're not just changing what you do. You're changing who you believe yourself to be. And who you believe yourself to be determines everything. It determines what choices feel natural, what environments you seek out, what relationships you're drawn to, what you're willing to tolerate, and what you're not. Build the identity first, or at least simultaneously, and the behavior follows. This is hard. It requires imagination. It requires you to start acting like a version of yourself that doesn't fully exist yet, which feels fake at first. But here's what's true. Every version of yourself that currently exists was once a version that didn't exist yet. Every confident, capable, healthy, grounded part of you started as a possibility. And you grew into it by acting as if it were already true. That's not fake. That's how humans become. We grow into the identities we choose. So choose carefully. Choose intentionally. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? Not what do I want to have, or where do I want to live, or what do I want to achieve? Who do I want to be? What do I want my character to be made of? What do I want to be true of me at my core, regardless of what I have or don't have? And then, as terrifying and uncertain as it is, start becoming that person. One choice at a time. One small act of alignment at a time. Let go of what contradicts it. Hold on to what supports it. Keep going even when you can't see the full picture yet. Because here's the thing about identity. It doesn't reveal itself all at once. It reveals itself in the living, in the choosing, in the letting go and the reaching toward. You don't figure out who you are and then start living. You live, and in the living, you discover who you are. So before I wrap this up, I want to leave you with one last thought. The things you're afraid to lose, they have given you something real. I don't want to minimize that. The relationship taught you things. The job built things in you. The habit got you through something. There was a reason you held on. There was something it gave you. And honoring that, really seeing and acknowledging what it gave you, is part of the letting go. You're not erasing the past when you move forward. You're not pretending it didn't matter. You're saying, it mattered. It shaped me. And now I'm ready to take what it gave me and carry it forward into the next thing. Into the next version of who I'm becoming. That's not betrayal. That's growth. That's the most human thing there is. The question I want to leave you with before we close, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments, is this. What is one thing you've been holding on to that you suspect you're keeping not because it's good for you, but because you don't know who you'd be without it? Just one thing. You don't have to have an answer about what to do about it yet. Just name it. Just see it clearly. Because the moment you can name it clearly, you've already started to separate yourself from it. You've already started to remember that you are not it. It is just something you've been holding. And everything you can hold, you can also set down. There is a version of you on the other side of this that you haven't met yet. A lighter version. Clearer. More fully yourself than you've been in years, maybe ever. A version that looks back at the holding on and understands it with compassion, and looks forward at the open hands and feels something that isn't grief. Something that feels a lot more like freedom. If this video made you think about something in your own life, if it brought up a feeling, an insight, a memory, a recognition, drop it in the comments right now. Seriously, even just one word. Because you are not the only person watching this who needed to hear it today, and your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to see to take their first step. And if this kind of deep, honest conversation about the way we actually work, about psychology, about attachment, about identity and growth, is something you want more of, then make sure you like this video so more people can find it, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what's coming next. We're just getting started, and the next conversation might be the one that changes everything for you. Stay curious, stay honest with yourself, and remember, you are not what you're holding. You are the one who's holding it, and you can always choose to open your hands.